Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League, from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered, from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Ridenauer, and it's going to be a tremendous episode today. We've got a lot to cover. Hope everyone's weekend was enjoyable. It was really nice to sit down and watch sports really all weekend long. Tons of baseball, a lot of basketball for any hoops fans out there. Hockey is continuing to roar on, and football right around the corner. A lot of really good stuff to watch this weekend, but I know everyone was very excited to see some action out on the diamond. So for today's episode, I want to first get into another recap of games from Saturday, August 15th, some really good matchups there, and then a little, update on the coronavirus testing with another team becoming infected and having to cancel games. I'll next move into my all-star picks that I think would start on the team if there was an all-star matchup this year. I know with the COVID-19 situation, there won't be a midsummer classic, but since it's right around the corner, or I should say, since it's right around that time, I figured it would be fitting to put together an all-star team for guys who've been playing very well. After that, I'll discuss MLB.com's top 10 young players ranking, who they were, where I would have liked to see the players ranked, and some players left off the list that I feel should have been added. I'll give my personal top 10 young players in the league right now as well. And be sure to stick around for the final segment today, as I'll share my top home run derby moments over the last few years, going way back to my childhood days and some a little bit more recent. A lot of really good stuff going on today. But first, again, I want to get into some recaps of games on Saturday, August 15th. And let me tell you what, there was a lot of good action. I mean, there's a lot of good, solid baseball action. I'll first kick it off. Brewers, Cubs, Milwaukee coming out on top 6-5 in 10. Really good stuff out in Milwaukee. I mean, put up some good spots in a couple innings, 3 runs in the 4th, and then they were able to answer and have 2 runs in the 10th, which ultimately led them to that victory. I will say one sign of worry, letting up 1 run in the bottom of the 10th to Chicago. Good thing that they didn't let up any more, because, again, they probably would have either continued to play on or probably would have lost. But it does show that their bullpen did a nice job at limiting the amount of runs that were scored in those extra innings. Avisail Garcia's go-ahead double, I mean, he roped that thing. He absolutely got all over it. Justin Smoke also had a really big 2-run double for Milwaukee. So a lot of really, really good stuff for the Brewers in that matchup against their division rival. Next game, Cardinals and White Sox, and there was actually a doubleheader, and this was interesting. As we all know, St. Louis had a lot of issues with coronavirus testing, and a lot of guys, coming up positive in testing, and as a result, they didn't play baseball for 16, 17 days. But let me tell you what, I got to give them credit. They came right back to it. It was like they didn't skip one beat at all. First game, because they had a doubleheader, 2 7-inning games against the White Sox. The first one, St. Louis jumped out all over Chicago, 5-1. Scored 4 runs in the top of the first. Chicago was only able to get 1 run on the board in that bottom third. And at first I was a little bit hesitant about these doubleheaders, these 7-inning doubleheaders. But honestly, if it's going to speed up the pace of play, and it's going to accelerate how games are, and it's going to eliminate dragging out those doubleheaders that are usually, 9 innings, and then you've got another one coming up in, 2 hours, and then there's another 9-inning game, that's a lot for players. That's a long day at the ball field. I mean, it usually is no matter what, but still, having those 7-inning doubleheaders, I think they'll be beneficial. I think that especially this year, and especially with guys or teams having to fit games in a very short amount of time, definitely a good idea. I have to say, Rob Manfred definitely hit the nail on the head on that one, so I have to give him credit on that one. But a good, really good first game in the doubleheader for the St. Louis Cardinals. And then the second game, same thing. St. Louis came out on top, 6-3 over the Chicago White Sox. White Sox have been struggling lately. I mean, they're dropping to the last 2, and then they lost a couple over the week. Really been struggling lately, but again, if I was a White Sox fan, it would not be a cause of concern. They're 10-11 right now. St. Louis is 4-3. So, I mean, you think about it, they've only played 7 games because they've been out of play for over 2 weeks. So, again, that is another issue that we are continuing to see in baseball. All of these teams having lopsided amount of games. One team has got 7 under their belt. The other team's got almost 20 games under their belt. So, as we can see, we're starting to witness the issues of this pandemic and how it's starting to affect really everything in baseball. But in this second game, St. Louis and Chicago both kind of came out slow. Chicago actually scored the first run of the game in the bottom of the third, and then St. Louis answered with a run in the top of the fourth. Chicago put on 2 more in the bottom of the fourth, but it was that top 5 inning that really St. Louis blew the gates wide open, scoring 4 runs. Chicago wasn't able to put up another run on the board, and then St. Louis added another insurance run at the end with in the top of the 7th. Tyler O'Neill hit an absolute moonshot of a home run, 2-run homer that got up all over off of his bat and just went flying. Paul Goldschmidt also hit a big solo home run, so really good day out of Paul Goldschmidt. And he's been somebody who's been struggling a little bit this year. He hasn't been hitting very well, not as well as he normally does. I mean, he's one of the better one of the better power hitters in baseball, especially at the first base position. But he's definitely starting to maybe pick it up a little bit here. And I think having these 2 weeks off, maybe it'll be beneficial. I mean, we saw how the Marlins have come back after their long layover. I mean, they haven't skipped a beat. They continue to roll on. I mean, they're first in the NL East right now. So, maybe these layovers of these, having to, these, I don't know what you want to call them, not the incubation period, but, the quarantining and the social distancing period that these teams have to go through once a positive test does come through and they come back and they start playing again, they seem to, be rested and rejuvenated and ready to go. So maybe it's a blessing in disguise, if you will. Another doubleheader on Saturday also, the Royals and the Twins. First game, the Twins took in 7 innings, 4-2. Minnesota really, I mean, the 3 through 5th innings, it was all theirs. I mean, they scored 2 in the bottom 3rd, bottom 4th they scored 1, in the bottom 5th they scored 1. Kansas City was able to put on 2 runs in the top of the 5th, but that was about it for them. Nelson Cruz hitting another bomb, 448-foot homer. Really, really big stuff out of Nelson Cruz. I mean, he's been dominating all year long. I mean, he's, in my opinion, the best DH in the AL right now, no question, and he's 40 years old, and he's still hitting bombs. So really good stuff out of Nelson Cruz. The next game, Royals actually bounced back and took from the Twins 4-2, so they pretty much just swapped scores there. Minnesota jumped out all over Kansas City first, scoring 1 run in the bottom of the first. Kansas City answered with a run in the top of the second, and then 3 runs in the top of the 4th for Kansas City is what propelled them into a victory. Whit Merrifield had 3 hits on the day. I saw something on social media, and this actually kind of aggravated me. And it said that Whit Merrifield, and I don't remember what Instagram page it was, but they said that Whit Merrifield is one of the most overrated baseball players in baseball. And I had to sit there and really digest that a little bit. And I was very confused by that because he's not a guy you hear about all the time. I mean, I watch SportsCenter almost every day, and I never hear a word about Whit Merrifield. Now, I don't have MLB.com, I don't have MLB TV, so I don't know what is said on MLB TV necessarily. I mean, I go on the app all the time, and there's never anything, glaringly obvious about Whit Merrifield. So for somebody to say that he's an overrated player when we don't even hear much about him to begin with, I don't know where you come up with that. I don't know how you get to that conclusion, but I mean, he's a 300 hitter. He hits for power. He's a very, very talented baseball player. I mean, he's in his young 30s, so he's still got a couple years left in him. Honestly, I didn't put him on my, and I know I'll get to it in my second segment, but I did not put him on my starting lineup for the All-Star team, but he would be a clear-cut favorite for a backup and for being a reserve. No question about it. He's a very, very good baseball player, a great hitter, and really, I mean, him and Salvador Perez have been holding it down for the Royals this year. I mean, they're 9-12 right now. Twins are 13-8. So Twins are, they're sitting fairly comfortably in that first place in the AL Central, especially with Chicago losing 2 straight on Saturday to St. Louis. So, that's some good stuff for the Minnesota Twins, but don't count the Royals out also. I mean, if Whit Merrifield and Perez start getting things to go and, possibly start picking up the pitching a little bit, I mean, we could have a totally different conversation the next 2 weeks. And things change very quickly, especially in this season. I mean, 1 minute a team could be in third place, and then the next minute you see that they're in first place. Things can change very quickly, but they can also make a turn for the worse very quickly as well if you're, putting up, like the White Sox, they've been on a stretch of losing the last, 5 or 6 days or so, and losing 2 straight to the Cardinals, especially when the Cardinals have just been off of baseball for 17 days. That's not a good sign if you're the White Sox. But again, I would not be worried if I was a White Sox fan. So next game, Mets-Phillies, a little NL East divisional rivalry. Phillies came out on top 6-2, and again, Mets have been really disappointing. I mean, they're 9-13 this year. Not a great start for them at all. I thought that they would be a very solid second place team, but I mean, as we can see, the Marlins have completely surprised everybody, and that has pushed the Braves now to second place. So I mean, everything just gets bumped down a little bit. Philadelphia came out first, scored in the bottom second, and then Philadelphia put up 5 runs in the bottom of the 5th, and that was really the deal breaker right there and the difference maker in that game. Aaron Nola getting his second win of the year, going on 2-1, 2.05 ERA for him. So really, really good start for him as well. Aaron Nola, I mean, one of the better pitchers in the NL. Young guy, has done a really, really nice job the last 2 or 3 years, and somebody that the Phillies, I think, are going to count on a lot in that rotation. They don't have a ton of power in that pitching rotation, and to have somebody like Nola, who is a big power pitcher, big strikeout guy, can get a lot of guys out, I think that's going to help them out in the long run. Gene Segura hit a solo homer. It was a good outing for the Philadelphia Phillies. They moved to 7-9 on the year, so I mean, it was a very positive performance for them on Saturday. Next game, Indians, Tigers, Cleveland coming out on top 3-1, and you know what? Cleveland is knocking on the door for Minnesota. I mean, they are right there. They are nipping on their heels. The Twins slip up one time, and I think they know that. I think Minnesota is aware. They slip up one time, they drop 3 or 4, or 4 or 5 or whatever, and the Indians go on a little bit of a run. I mean, they're going to be a little bit of a switch in the top of the Central Division there, no question. I mean, they're 12-9, like I said. They've been playing very, very well. Don't discredit the Tigers, though. I mean, they're 9-9. Yeah, they've dropped the last 2 games, but you know what? They've been playing way better than people have expected. Jacoby Jones, one of the very surprising and bright young stars on that Tigers team, and somebody who's really been leading them in every single hitting category, whether it's batting average, OPS, slugging percentage, whatever. He's been getting it done at the plate, which has been a really, really good sign. Again, Shane Bieber doing his thing. I mean, he's my favorite pitcher in the AL. 11 Ks last night against the Tigers. Really, really good stuff out of Shane Bieber. I mean, he is impressive. And again, if you don't know who he is, if you haven't heard his name, I don't know if you've been paying attention to the baseball season this year or not, but I mean, he's doing a really, really good job this year. He's playing at baseball at a level that I don't think many pitchers are able to do, and especially at this, early on of the season. And he actually tied a record for third most through 5 appearances, third most strikeouts this season through 5 appearances in the division era, 54 Ks in his first 5 starts. So again, the guy just continues to rack up records. I mean, he already had he had tied the record for most strikeouts between the first 2 appearances for a starting pitcher with 27. He struck out 13 in the first game and 14 in the next, or whatever it was, something like that. So, I mean, the guy is a Cy Young candidate player, and he's somebody that we're going to hear a lot about for many years. He's 4-0, 1.30 ERA. Really, really, I mean, he's awesome to watch, and he's got a lot of good stuff. He's got a great arsenal of pitches, and again, it's just that overpowering, speed that guys just can't catch up to. And if you throw that in with, he's got a taller frame, he's able to extend further out, so the ball comes in much quicker than it would for somebody who is shorter. So the distance in which it travels, batters don't have as much time to react. They already have very little time to react. So Shane Bieber, hats off to you, my friend, and the Indians coming out with a big 3-1 win over the Detroit Tigers. Next game, Braves, Marlins, 2-1. This was a close one. I mean, this was a really close one, and it was scoreless through 6 innings for both teams. Braves now moved to 12-10, while the Marlins are 9-5. Marlins continue to get it done. I don't know how they're doing it. I don't know. Again, I know I keep saying, whatever it might be, that they're something in the water. Or I don't know if it's something that they're eating. I have no idea. But they're playing with an attitude of, hey, we don't have a whole lot to lose. And you know what? They really don't, because when you think about it, they're a young team. They don't have a ton of star power. Jesus Aguilar has been a really big bright spot for them this year, though. And it's interesting to watch teams like the Marlins kind of come out of nowhere, and that's, I think, what the beauty of baseball is that you have teams like the Marlins that, seemingly seem, not threatening. They don't really seem that, they're not a glamorous-looking team like the Yankees or the Dodgers, but they're getting it done, and I think that they're proving a lot of people wrong, and they've added some pretty good, players in the offseason. Like I mentioned, Aguilar was a big pickup, Francisco Cervelli, I know he's getting old, but again, it's that veteran leadership that they're always looking for, and I think that if they continue to build, and they continue to improve, Brian Anderson, he's a good bright spot for them also. He's only hitting .245 this year, but 4 homers, 14 RBIs, .893 OPS, so pretty solid power numbers out of him. Has not been hitting well the last 7 games, though, only batting .192 from the plate with a .423 slugging percentage, so his power numbers are down a little bit, but don't let that fool you. Again, there's a lot of time left to play in this season. I know that we're just about the halfway point. Still, we have 30 or so games left in the season to go on. Freddie Freeman did not hit well from the plate, 1 for 4. Marcell Ozuna only went 1 for 3. So, a little bit of a struggle for Atlanta, but they were still able to come out on top, getting that 1 run in that top ninth inning. That was really the difference maker and the go-ahead run for them to come out on top over the Miami Marlins. So good win for the Braves. And the next game, Tampa Bay and Toronto. That's actually a game that got suspended through 4 innings because of rain, so they're going to have to make that up. The Rays were out ahead of the Blue Jays 1-0, and it, again, when you factor in a pandemic, and then sometimes you do have Mother Nature coming in and doing her thing, now you've got yourself an even bigger twizzy, because now you have even more games that are going to have to be canceled, and now you're going to have to make up more games. But again, it's not that many. It's only 1. It was a rain delay, or it was a rain out, so not a huge deal. But again, 1-0 right now in that one. It's a bottom 4 game, so it'll probably be picked up eventually. Not quite sure when, but I'm sure that it'll be resumed at some point or another. Next game, Athletics Giants. Again, another West Division, or a West Coast rivalry between the A's and the Giants. Athletics continuing to dominate, coming out on top 7-6. They moved to 15-6 on the year. Giants continue to struggle, though. They're 8-14. And Oakland really did a nice job at spreading out their offense like they usually do. 2 runs in the 3rd, a run in the 6th, and then 4 runs in the 9th. And San Francisco, they put up 3 runs in both the 4th and the 7th. So they were up on top of the Oakland going into that 9th inning, 6-3. And then they blew the lead and they gave up 4 runs in the 9th. So that's a really good sign. If you're Oakland, not only are you dominating to start games, but you're also able to pull yourselves out of holes that you might dig yourself. And there's nothing better than when your back's against the wall, you're going into the 9th inning, and you've got 3 outs to do whatever you possibly can, and you're able to come out on top, and you put up, not only 1 run or 2 runs, but you put up 4 runs in that 9th inning. That's very hard to do. Usually at that point in the game, you're not seeing big 4 or 5 run spots in innings, and especially in that 9th inning. So good stuff out of the Oakland A's, no question. Mike Yastrzemski having another big day, had himself a home run. He's hitting very well for the Giants. He's really been a very promising player for them, and really kind of I don't want to say the focal point, because Donovan Solano has also been a big piece for them, but don't count out Mike Yastrzemski. He's got a lot of pop in his bat. He's 29. He did come up a little bit later in his career, but sometimes when guys get called up later on in their career, they might wind up playing further into their 30s because they've got a little bit more experience. They've got a little bit more like I said, obviously experience, but wherewithal and just kind of awareness as a player, and a lot more smarts as an athlete as well, somebody that has been seasoned and has been around the block a couple times, and being able to have somebody like that's always a great thing, especially for this Giants team that does have a lot of young guys on their team for the most part. So Solano and Yastrzemski have really been holding it down for San Francisco, but they're going to obviously need a little bit more help. They can't just do it 2 people. So 7-6 in that final. Oakland continuing to dominate this year. Next one, really the greatest rivalry in baseball, in my opinion. Yankees-Red Sox, Yankees coming out on top 11-5, and this was a nice back-and-forth game. Yankees scored 2 in the bottom of the first, Boston scored 3 in the top of the third, and then Yankees answered with 2 in the bottom of the fourth, and then they put up 7 runs between the 6th and 7th inning, 4 in the bottom 6 and 3 in the bottom 7. Boston was only able to put up 2 in that top of the 9th, but at that point it was too late for the Red Sox, and Boston continues to struggle. 6-15, this is one of the worst starts that I have seen Boston have, I think probably in my lifetime, really. Yankees, again, they're jumping out all over teams. They're 14-6 now. Clint Frazier had 5 RBIs on the day, so, you're factoring in one guy had almost or just about half of your offense. That's pretty good. That is really, really good. Eovaldi moves to 1-2. He got the loss. He's really been struggling, and, if Eovaldi is your top pitcher in your rotation right now with a 5.93 ERA, he's, probably the first option for them right now. That's not a good sign. That's not a good thing to have. Sales continuing to rehab from the Tommy John surgery. Price and Porcello are both gone. So you're losing a lot of pieces in that rotation that was at one point very strong. It was a very, very dominant starting rotation that did a really, really nice job for, a good couple of years. Now we're starting to see the effects of it, of them not being around anymore, and Boston is now really starting to struggle. They're swimming at the bottom with the Blue Jays at this point. And the fact that the Orioles, and I can't believe the Orioles are continuing to do what they've done. I'll get to the Orioles game in a little bit, but they're continuing to put up a lot of surprising numbers. They've got a lot of guys that have just been hitting the heck out of the ball, and I got to tip my hat to Baltimore. Again, like the Miami Marlins, in general, this 2020 year is very odd, and I think that having Baltimore and Miami, 2 teams that are in, the first or second, maybe third spot in their division that are usually at the bottom barrel of the division, having them all of a sudden, rise through the rankings, I think it's just adding to the weirdness of 2020. But that's okay. That's all right. And it's still, a lot of fun to watch the unconventional teams kind of rise up and start doing their thing and start to play well also. Next game, Mariners, Astros. Astros come out on top 2-1, a really, really close one. Houston scored 2 runs early on. They scored 1 in the bottom of the 2nd, scored 1 in the bottom of the 4th, and then Seattle scored 1 in the top of the 8th. But that was really it. Yuli Gurriel's solo home run was a big one for Houston. Really good stuff out of Christian Javier, 5 Ks in 6 innings. Again, a team that, they're kind of falling on hard times a little bit. They've got Zach Greinke did pitch well the other day in his debut. Verlander's been out, though, and Cole is no longer, with the team. So they've lost a good bit of, and Dallas Keuchel's not around anymore either. So, that's 3 really solid all-star, if not Cy Young candidate players, and they're all off your rotation, and you used to have them at one point. Now Zach Greinke is still around, so that is a good sign that he's still there. But good stuff out of Christian Javier. Really nice job. So the Astros moved to 10-10. Mariners are 7-15. I really thought that Seattle, when they were about 4-9, 5-9, that they were going to make a little bit of a run. But ever since then they've only won 3 games, so 2 or 3 games. So it has really not panned out well for them at all. Houston moves to a perfect or an even 500. They're 10-10 right now on the year. Again, they're not doing well. They're not doing well at all. Having a really, really tough year, and do I think that it has anything to do with the off-season allegations and that whole scandal? Maybe, possibly, but I don't want to necessarily point the finger right at that. I think it's also just a matter of, Altuve's not hitting well. They'd say, or I'd say, now Michael Brantley's been a bright star for them, and he's been hitting the ball well. He's really been carrying the load. So has Carrera, but Bregman has been struggling. Gurriel's been in and out of the lineup. So, they've got some guys that have really been missing, essentially, that their bats have been missing and that their play has been missing from the lineup. So they could start to turn things around here. 20 games into the season, they still have, 2/3 of the way to go. They could make some miraculous turnaround. But then if that happens, it will make me wonder, are there going to be any people out there saying, oh, I wonder if they're cheating? Oh, I wonder if they're, this, that, or the other. I really don't think that they're going to go back to that way. I think that they've they got caught. The cat's out the bag. They can't do anything about it now. Everybody knows. It's out in the air. Everybody is aware of it. Just move on, and we all get it. That what they did was not right, was not okay. But, at this point, let's just move on. Let's watch some baseball. So we'll see if the Astros are able to turn things around in their season. Next game, Orioles and Nationals, and the Orioles continuing to rock and roll. And I can't believe I'm going to say this. They are 12-8 this year. Yes, they are 12-8. They beat the Nationals 7-3, and they jumped out all over the Nationals. Scored 2 runs in the bottom of the first, scored 2 runs in the bottom of the second, and then put up runs in the bottom 4th, bottom 6th, and bottom 8th. So again, very spread out offense, able to score in different innings throughout the entire game. Really good stuff out of Pedro Severino, 2-run double for him. And Corbin getting his first loss of the year. He's got a 3.91 ERA. Corbin's, he's like I keep mentioning, he's a very good third option in a rotation. He's a very good third option in a rotation, especially with Strasburg and Scherzer being the main 2 guys in that, top 5 starting pitching. Anibal Sanchez has really not been doing well. I mean, he has been struggling would be an understatement. He's been really, really having a hard time this year. So, again, having Corbin, maybe starting to pick up the slack. I mean, getting the loss is always not a good thing, but I will say the Nationals as a whole are struggling, moved to 7-11 on the year, and for them coming off of a World Series win, I really didn't expect them to, come out making a huge splash in the beginning of the year. I really didn't. Now, do I think that they could do what they did last year and then turn it around all of a sudden? I don't know. Maybe. I think that it's going to be a matter of, they're going to be against the clock, and if they don't start acting sooner rather than later, before you know it, they're going to be 6 or 7, maybe even 8 games under 500, and then by that time, we've got under 30 games left, and they're going to have to really play perfect baseball through the rest of the year. So it'll be interesting to see how the Nationals finish out, if they can turn things around themselves, but I want to see how the Orioles finish out. I want to see how strong they can finish, and if they can make a case for second place, if they can really try and elbow their way past the Rays, and who knows, maybe they can dethrone the Yankees in the AL East. Next game, Padres Diamondbacks. This was a very, very close one. Diamondbacks coming out on top 7-6. Padres dropping the last 2 on a little bit of a losing streak, and I know that a 2-game losing streak in the grand scheme of things is not huge, but in a season like this, you don't want to have, losses piled on top of losses, because that's never a good sign. That's never, ever a good sign at all. San Diego scored the first run of the game in the top of the first, and then Arizona scored the next run of the game in the bottom of the 4th, and then they were able to score 4 in the bottom of the 6th, 2 in the bottom of the 7th, and San Diego was able to tack on 2 in the top of the 8th and 3 in the top of the 9th. So, it was a back-and-forth game. It was a back-and-forth baseball game, and that's what you love to see out of these 2 NL West rivals. And, Fernando Tatis continuing to dominate from the plate, his 9th home run this season. The guy's 21 years old. He's 21 years old, and he's hitting 9 home runs. I know 21-year-olds that are still in college. That's wild to think about. You've got 2 totally opposite ends of the spectrum of 21-year-olds. One is still in school, and the other one is hitting 450-foot home runs and is leading the league in home runs next to Aaron Judge. That's pretty unbelievable. We're gonna hear more about him in the 3rd segment today about my young players, because he, without question, is one of the top young players in baseball. So tough loss for the Padres, but good win for the Diamondbacks. Maybe they're starting to get things going. They're 10-11 now. They've strung together a couple wins, and I know that I've mentioned that they've been a little bit disappointing, because I originally touted them as a good, solid second place team in that NL West, but now I'm starting to see that it's really going to be a 3-way fight for first place between the Dodgers, Rockies, and the Padres. Next game, Rangers and Rockies. Rangers coming out on top over Colorado 6-4. Colorado did score the first 2 runs of the game in the bottom of the 2nd. Texas answered with 1 in the top of the 3rd and then 2 in the top of the 5th. Colorado was able to score 1 in the bottom of the 8th, 1 in the bottom of the 9th, but it was really a 3-run top of the 8th inning for the Rangers that was the difference maker. Rangers moved to 10-9 while the Rockies are 12-8. So again, we're all floating around that 11-11, 12-8, 13-9 record right now between the Dodgers, Rockies, and the Padres. So now I should say 15-7, because the Dodgers are now 15-7, but still you're all in that, very similar range, if you will, and similar winning percentage. So it's going to be a fight. It's going to be a fight, and it's going to be, I think, a down-to-the-wire finish this year in the NL West. Derek Dietrich hit a 3-run homer for the Rangers. He's been a big pickup for them. I know that he was cut, and then he got signed to a minor league deal and picked up by the Rangers. He's a guy that just brings a lot of power in his bat, and if you're lucky, maybe you'll get a year where he hits, 20-plus, 30-plus home runs. But again, you just want to have that power in your lineup, and having him, produce 3 runs for them himself, that's that's really good. I mean, that's half of the runs coming from one guy, and that's why you want power guys in your lineup. So next game, actually the last game of the evening, Dodgers-Angels. Dodgers coming out on top in 10 innings, 6-5. They moved to 15-7, while the Angels are 7-14. Angels continuing to struggle. I mean, they're really having a hard time. Max Muncy with the go-ahead sac fly in the top of the 10th inning. Dodgers scored the first 4 runs of the game, able to jump, or I should say they scored, the Angels scored the first 2 runs of the game, and then the Dodgers answered back in the top of the second and the top of the third with 2 runs apiece. Angels were able to put on 1 in the bottom of the third and 2 in the bottom of the fifth, and then the Dodgers tacked on 1 in the top of the seventh and the ultimate winning run in the top of the 10th. I mean, this Dodgers team continues to show why they're so dangerous. I mean, they can get it done no matter what point of the game, no matter what way they have to do it. If it's Max Muncy having to hit a sac fly, then that's going to, that has to happen. A couple guys with some really big days from the plate. Cody Bellinger, 2 for 4. A.J. Pollock, 2 for 5. Mookie Betts went 2 for 5. Mookie Betts having a great year in his first year in the L.A. Dodgers. 309 batting average with a 1,050 OPS. Having a really solid season, especially in that leadoff spot, which, I mean, having a guy with an over 1,000 OPS in that leadoff position, again, I've said this before and I'll say this again, I'll continue to say it. You need that. That is crucial to have. That's a guy that's getting on base at least 5 to 6 times out of 10, and to have a leadoff guy that gets on that much, especially in baseball, that's a huge positive in your plus column, if you will, because not a lot of teams have a guy that can be that productive in that leadoff spot. So great win for the Dodgers. Again, moving to 15-7. They're still controlling that first place position right now in the NL West. Now, the one game that was postponed, and it was besides the Blue Jays and the Rays, the Pirates and the Reds. And as we know, or if you all are not aware, the Reds have now had a couple cases. I think it's just only one case on their team that's been a positive case for the coronavirus. The entire weekend series has been canceled with the Pittsburgh Pirates. So again, we're starting to see these effects of these guys that are not able to follow protocols. I don't know the inside and out of it. I don't know if there was, with the allegations that the Marlins had with going to a nightclub or with the Cardinals going to a casino. I don't think it's necessarily that with the Reds. I mean, it has not been revealed, which Cincinnati player it was, but both teams are having to, make up these games possibly in the future. They do have an off day on Monday, so we could possibly see somebody, or they might see a 7-inning double header on that day. But we'll, it continues to add on. It continues to add on. Matt Davidson was the last Reds player to test positive, and he was placed on the injured list on July 25th. So, I mean, they haven't had an issue for quite some time, and then they started having some issues, and, I mean, it just kind of adds to 2020, right? It's just another thing that we've got to deal with. And I was listening to SportsCenter last night, and there hasn't been no positive cases every day since July 26th. Like the last day that there wasn't at least one positive case in any regard was July 26th. So every day since then there's been at least one positive case. Now, it's been able to be controlled in certain situations and others not so much, but still, the fact that you've got that many days, about 3 weeks of just straight cases, we need to do something. We need to fix this. Something needs to be done before it's too late. I think it's not going to be too late because we're already halfway through the season. So unless there's just some widespread outbreak amongst 4 different teams, all in the same division, I really don't think it should be a cause of concern, because until then, and until that point happens, everything should be A-okay, and everybody should, again, just be careful, be cautious, be responsible, but we're going to keep moving forward as if seasons are going to continue on, which it will, and things are going to keep picking up, and it's going to be an exciting finish this year. So that'll do it for us in this first segment, but stay right there, folks, because after the commercial, I'll be back picking my starting all-star teams for both the NL and AL, and sharing, I think, or sharing which players I think have been having some of the best years in their career and who are the top players in the league so far this year. We'll be right back here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA, to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Jack Ridenauer still with you, and in our last segment, I gave my usual rundown of games from August 15th, a lot of really good games that happened, some COVID-19 updates with the Reds now being another team to fall victim to the pandemic with some players testing positive in their locker room. Don't go anywhere after this, folks, because later on I'll be ranking my favorite home run derbies of the last 10 years, which ones were very memorable for me and which not so much. I want to now stick with the All-Star Week feel since we would be approaching the All-Star game with it being the halfway mark of the shortened season, so I want to put together my all-star team that I think would be selected for this year. I'll go through all positions in the AL and NL and give some thoughts on who I think should start, who could make a push to start, and anyone who's been a surprise this season. So I'll get into it with the AL, and I have to say the talent seems to be mostly in the NL this year, but that doesn't mean there aren't any players in the AL who have been, having remarkable years themselves. I'll start off in the right field position, and I gotta say I'd put Aaron Judge out there, no question. This shouldn't come as a shock either, because Judge once again doing his thing this year, leading the AL in homers with 9 and OPS with a 1,101 clip. The guy has been flat out crushing the ball. Not to mention he leads the AL in slugging percentage with a 758%, 50 points higher than the second place person in Brandon Lowe. He would be a clear-cut favorite for being a starting right field for the All-Star game. I mean, won the home run derby a couple years ago. He's been an All-Star. He's been an MVP caliber player, Silver Slugger. I mean, the guy can do it all. I mean, the guy is a natural-born hitter, and he's going to be around in this league for many, many years to come. So he would be my starting right fielder. My starting center fielder, again, this should not come as a shock. I mean, it would be another obvious one, Mike Trout. In my opinion, I think a lot of people would also agree with this. The best baseball player in the league in terms of just five tools, and when you talk about a five-tool player, Mike Trout is your perfect example of a five-tool player, hitting .308 this year with 8 homers and 16 RBIs, an incredible fielder. He's yet to commit an error this year. Arguably, I mean, again, he's the only legit five-tool player in my mind, and he would be the only guy that I think could start out in center field this year in the AL for the All-Star game. Now, he does not have as many at-bats as he usually does, around only 60 or so, because he did miss some time because of paternity leave, but that does not mean that he's still not dominating. He's having an unbelievable year, and he would be, without question, my starting center fielder. Now, to the left field, this would be an interesting one. Teoscar Hernandez, Blue Jays left fielder, has been tattooing the ball like the other two outfielders, tied for third in the league with homers with 7. He's been on a tear recently, hitting .310 in his last 7 games, 3 homers, so starting to really heat up, and a highly touted player as a minor leaguer. So now he's starting to come into his own and really become the professional player that people were looking to see him become, and he's really starting to blow up now. And let me tell you what, if there was an All-Star game, no question he'd be on this team. Now into the infield portion of it, first base. This was a tough one. This was a hard position to pick for me because there wasn't a lot of guys in the AL that are dominating at the first base position. But Luke Voit for the Yankees, I think he's a big power hitter, not to mention he is on the Yankees, so that does help his stock a little bit. But having his strength at the plate, 5 homers, 506 slugging percentage, he does tend to strike out a good bit, striking out in 19 of 55 at-bats. So, if you're rounding those up, 20 strikeouts to 60 at-bats, that's about a third of the time he's striking out. But his pop in the bat is, where it's at. The numbers he's been able to put together so far, that's what has really struck out to me. Not to mention he's hitting .273, and for a power guy, very solid average. And a guy that, usually if you just have a straight power guy, they're not hitting for, higher than 250 or 260. But he's able to hit for 270 plus. So overall, a very solid hitter. I would put him at first base. Second base would continue with the Yankees theme. Now, DJ LeMahieu did go down last night with a sprained thumb on Saturday, August 15th. So we'll see if he'll be back, and if he's, going to be all right or healthy. But nonetheless, obviously the All-Star game is not going to happen, so it doesn't really matter. But I would pick DJ LeMahieu as my second baseman. The guy's, 6'4", 6'5", second baseman. He's putting together a second straight career year, leading the AL with a .429 average. One of the few guys in the league over 400. And if he keeps putting up the numbers he's been putting up so far, it's only going to get better for LeMahieu. He's only got 2 homers, but a 1.031 OPS in 70 at-bats. So he's been very consistent, and it's clear it's not a fluke for him hitting for over 400. That is something that is very achievable for him to do this year. Also leads the AL in hits with 30. So a guy who's a born hitter and having yet again another all-star caliber year. I got to tip my hat to DJ LeMahieu. I would totally put him at second base. Now, honorable mention would be Brandon Lowe. He's second in OPS in the AL, having a very good year. Hard to compete with LeMahieu, though, who's hitting, way over 400. But again, Brandon Lowe would be a great backup in the All-Star game. He would be a fantastic backup, and he would 100% make it. But again, if DJ LeMahieu were to was not having the year that he's having, I would stick Brandon Lowe there because he's been playing very well for the Tampa Bay Rays. Over to the shortstop position, Beau Beshet. This might be a shock to put this guy in the starting lineup with him being so young, but his numbers have been doing the talking clearly. Batting .350, 5 homers, 1.048 OPS, only 60 at-bats, but still puts up high numbers in under 70 ABs. He's 22 years old. He had a great year last year hitting .311, but didn't get a lot of attention. I mean, being on the Blue Jays does not help your case. Again, and I don't know if anybody else out there agrees with me on that or not, but if you're on a team that is very good and that has a lot of publicity surrounding it, you're going to get recognized much, much more. It's obvious, and it's very apparent. So if you're on the Blue Jays, the little old Blue Jays, and you're dead last in the AL East, it's going to be hard to get any notoriety when, the top dogs in that same division, all their players are getting noticed. So Beau Beshet, I think, is going to be a guy that, should be noticed and made mention of much more, starting to bubble to the surface and really getting the recognition he should get. One of the best young players in the MLB, someone who we will hear much more about as time goes on, and we will hear more about in my next segment when I get into the top young players in baseball. Over to the third base position, Renato Nunez, hard-hitting third baseman for the Orioles, and with their start, I have to give props to someone who's been a big part of their great hitting, them being one of the best hitting teams in the MLB this year. The last 7 games, he's really been doing damage. I mean, 11 for 27 from the plate, 3 bombs, an .815 slugging percentage. So another guy who's been heating up lately from the plate and would fit nicely as the third baseman for the AL in an All-Star game. I mean, having an .815 slugging percentage, that is unbelievable. That is unheard of. Now, it's only over a 7-game span. Yes, I know, so it's not a whole lot of baseball, but still, it doesn't matter. He's hitting that well over that, over a week's period. I mean, imagine if he starts doing that on a consistent basis. I mean, maybe not to that level, but on a consistent basis in general, he's going to have a monumental year for the Orioles. And I mean, he's just one of the many guys. I mean, Severino, Ramirez, a couple guys in that lineup, and for the Orioles who have been playing unbelievable baseball lately, and really the reason why they're 12-8 and why they're knocking on the door in the AL East. So for the pitching position, hands down, best pitcher in the AL, I think, Shane Bieber. I mean, he's got a 1.52 ERA, third in the AL. He's 3-0. Well, now he's 4-0 in his 5 games, and he's got 54 Ks over that stretch. Again, third with the record was, I think he's tied for third for the most strikeouts over 5-game appearance, and with 54. He's been really mowing players down left and right, having a really great year. Recently only struck out 4 a couple games ago, but again, he's not been lower than 8 Ks this year in terms of strikeouts in a game. So a really efficient starting pitcher who I think could come away as the Cy Young winner this year, no question. And I think he's my favorite. I know I mentioned last week in my last episode about top Cy Young candidates. He's right there on my list. I mean, I think he would probably win it if I was voting, and if I had a say in anything, I would vote him first. Next, over to the catcher position, Salvador Perez. Very seasoned catcher for the Royals, has been having an awesome year, 8th in the AL in batting average, hitting .318, 4 homers, and an .859 OPS. One of the better backstop catchers in the league as well, a great defensive catcher. He's been an All-Star 6 other times, so, I mean, it's no shock to him, and it's something that doesn't come as a shock to him being named onto an All-Star team. He's continued to prove why he's one of the best catchers in the league, and he's really been holding it down for the Royals. I mean, they've been kind of struggling lately, so having Perez's bat in the lineup and also his veteran leadership definitely adds to, possibly how the Royals could, maybe wind up this year if they do get things going sooner rather than later. But I would definitely put Salvador Perez at that catcher position. And then the DH, Nelson Cruz. I mean, the big fella, the old guy, whatever you want to call him, doesn't matter because he's been so dominant from the plate this year, hitting .342 and 76 at-bats, 6 home runs, 21 RBIs, leading the AL in RBIs, and really one of only 3 guys with 20 or more runs batted in. Blackman continuing to put up monster numbers at the age he's at. It's definitely an all-star caliber year for him without question. I mean, really without question. So now I want to move over to the NL, which I think has a lot of talented players and a lot of players that could make cases for being in the starting lineup. A couple guys that, I mean, if you ask 10 different people, you'd probably get 10 different answers. It's that hard to select one notable guy in some of these positions. So I'll start it again in the right field. Charlie Blackman. You can't leave him off any list this year. Not MVP, not Silver Slugger, and not All-Star, because the guy has been crushing the ball, which I think is a little bit of an understatement for him with how well he's been hitting the ball. I mean, he leads the NL in hits, batting a whopping .447 average with 3 homers, 20 RBIs, similar RBI numbers to Nelson, but over 100 points higher in batting average with a 1 point, and he's got a 1.127 OPS. So it would be a head-scratcher to not have him start. He's been too good, been a big part of the Rockies' success to Blackman. He's been a big part of their success and definitely a deserving of a starting position. And I think that he could probably be the most legitimate contender to hit 400 this year. I really do believe that. Do I think that DJ LeMahieu will? Maybe. But I think Blackman has, I mean, if you were to put a bet down on Blackman right now to bat over 400, I think you'd walk away with, very, very confidently. I mean, at least I would, and I'm not a betting man, but I would bet money on Blackman to hit over 400 this year. Now, Bryce Harper has been having himself an impressive year, too. If someone said he should start, I'd at least listen. He's batting .340, much better than what he hit last year, a 1.136 OPS, .702 slugging percentage in the last 15 games. So he would be at least on the reserve squad, but he's definitely been having a huge year himself. And then Mookie Betts and Nick Castellanos, they would also be very viable candidates. I mean, Betts having a very solid year in his first year as a Dodger, batting .309. Castellanos soaring the rankings for possibly an MVP-type year for him. So 2 other candidates to start, but again, hard to compete with a guy who's hitting almost .450, and he's really been flirting with .500, which is even more mind-blowing. I mean, who would have thought that somebody could even come close to hitting 500? I mean, you heard in the offseason before the season started, somebody might hit 400 this year, but 500, I think that was way out of the question. And for him to inch his way towards that, that's pretty impressive. So Charlie Blackman would get my start in the right field. Center field, Starling Marte. Now, a lot of you may have just said, why in the world would you pick him? But let me tell you why. He's batting .362, which is 70-plus points higher than his average from a year ago, and he's on his way to his only 300-plus year. He's also having a career high in OPS with 972. He's got 10 RBIs, great power numbers for him as well, and he's got a .536 slugging percentage. A guy who, when he wants to play well, he can really be a force to be reckoned with in the outfield. And he's got a pretty good glove, again, when he wants to play. And it seems like there's a little bit of a resurgence with him in Arizona. And, living in Pittsburgh and watching a lot of Pirates games, having a lot of Pirates friends, or a lot of friends that are Pirates fans, having family that are Pirates fans, you start to see, the day in, the day out of what it's like to be a Pirates fan. And it was a struggle to see, Starling Marte, sometimes, kick the ball around out in the outfield, make a foolish mistake on the base path. I think that's where he really struggles is running the bases. I think sometimes he just makes some boneheaded mistakes, and it's kind of like, why did you try to go for 3 there when you should have just stayed at second base? But again, I think he's in a position now. He's in a place where, they could make the playoffs. They're at least a playoff, I don't want to say contender or caliber team, but they're a much more playoff-oriented team than the Pirates are. I mean, the Pirates are just flat-out bad. And I hate to say that, but they are. They're just flat-out bad. And as a result, I think that a lot of that had to probably do with his attitude and his feel towards playing for the Pirates. Not saying that he, was doing it on purpose, but I think now playing for a team that is a legitimate team that has good players, we'll hear from, about one of his teammates that is on my all-star team as well. I think that adds to it a little bit. I think that adds to a guy's motivation and a guy's desire and will to play and play well and play at the best possible level that he can play. So I think that having him in a Diamondbacks uniform is going to suit him well for his career. So he's my starting center fielder. Now, over in left field, Jesse Winkler. Like Castellanos for the Reds, Winkler is having a tremendous year, leading the NL in OPS with a 1.196%, .365 batting average. He could be on his way to his first 300-plus hitting season. He's leading the league in on-base percentage with a .484 clip also, 8 walks on the year, and 19 hits and 52 at-bats. So someone who has really done a nice job at getting on base and would find himself, in his lone all-star team this year, so far in his career. I could see him becoming an all-star for years to come. And again, watch out for this Reds team. And maybe not this year, and maybe we were all a little bit aggressive in terms of, hey, they're going to be really good this year. They picked up Moustakas and Castellanos. They're going all the way. Maybe it's going to take a little bit more time. Maybe it's going to take a couple years. Maybe it's not going to be this year, but, maybe it's going to be 2 years down the road or 3 years down the road, especially with guys like Jesse Winkler and having some solid pitching behind them, Trevor Bauer, Sonny Gray. It's going to add up for them. It's going to add up for them in the long run, and I think that the Reds are going to be a team that, again, maybe not this year, but maybe down the road, that they'll actually be a legitimate contender in the NL Central. Shortstop position, now I'm going to move into the infield, jump around a little bit. Shortstop, no question, it's got to be Fernando Tatis Jr. I mean, if you haven't heard about this guy yet, either you haven't been following baseball, you haven't been listening to the GSMC baseball podcast, or you just haven't been watching any sports, because this 21-year-old slugger is setting the league on fire right now with his hot start, hitting .301 with 8 homers and 18 RBIs. Now he's got 9 homers, actually. Really good numbers out of him, and not to mention over 1,000 OPS as well. And to be 21 and doing this is even more incredible. No question, would he make the All-Star team this year? Really, he's one of the top young players in the league also, so somebody that, somebody to watch out for, somebody to pay attention to for, if not this year, for many, many, many years to come. Donovan Solano is another shortstop I think could possibly make the starting lineup. He is batting .444, the only other .400 hitter in the NL, but Tatis does have 20 more at-bats than him, which really stands out to me in terms of who should get the start. Plus, Tatis has hit more homers than him also, so I would probably have to give the start to Tatis, but again, I think Donovan Solano would definitely be a great reserve or backup on the All-Star team. Moving to second base, Cattell Marte, the other Marte on the Diamondbacks, who's been having a really good year himself, batting .325. Not great power, though. He's only got a .786 OPS, so someone who's more of a contact guy, but he does a great job of being that contact guy. I mean, he's third in the NL in hits with 26, has a solid glove at second, an All-Star last year. He's continuing on the strong season he had a year ago, putting up numbers, from all over the place, really. I mean, he's able to spray the ball all around the field. He's really having a nice job. I'd have to, no question, get him or give him a starting spot if there was an All-Star game this year. I think Cattell Marte is going to be one of the better second basemen to come, not only this year, but again next year and the year after that. Now, third base, for me, this was, again, it was tough for me, like in the AL for the first base. Third base, I'd have to give it to Justin Turner. But, again, I'm not so confident on that, right? I'm not super confident on that selection. I do think that there are other guys that could maybe you make a case for, Asdrubal Cabrera being one of them. Turner has 16 RBIs with an .828 OPS. He's been doing a good job at bringing in runs. I have to give him that, especially with the high-powered Dodgers offense. I mean, he just adds to it. Doesn't draw a ton of walks, but as a guy that can get on base, he's clutch, and he's got a good glove over at third. I'd have to give him the nod and start him over Asdrubal Cabrera. Cabrera's been hitting .276, 4 homers and 13 RBIs, .942 OPS, so 2 fairly even third basemen. Cabrera having a couple numbers higher than Turner and vice versa. So I could see really either one of these guys starting. I mean, if you ask 10 people, you'd probably get 5 answers for Cabrera and 5 for Turner, or you'd get 6 for Turner and 4 for Cabrera, 7 for Cabrera, 3 for Turner, whatever it might be. You get a lot of different answers out of people. I don't think it would be a unanimous selection. Over at first base, one of the best left-handed hitters in the league, Freddie Freeman. I mean, he's hitting .270, such a smooth swing on him, only 3 homers and 12 RBIs, but he's been a big impact guy for this team, as he's always been for Atlanta. Last 7 games, he's really woken up, batting .417 from the plate, and with how well he can hit, this makes him a prime candidate for the first base position in the All-Star game. I really think that this would be a year that Freddie Freeman would, no question, make the All-Star team, and again, he'd probably be a starter. Over to the pitching position now, Sonny Gray. I mean, I could not leave him off of my starting lineup. I just could not do it. I mean, is it a shock? Am I shocked I'm picking him? No, and I don't think anyone else should be, because Gray's been absolutely dealing this year so far. He leads the NL in innings pitched, wins, and strikeouts. He's 4-1 right now with a 2.05 ERA, 45 Ks and 30 2/3 of innings of work. He's been a great help for the Reds team. With him and Trevor Bauer, this could be a deadly 1-2 punch for Cincy, and two rotation guys we could see a lot for the next few years. And comparing them to another team that's really got a fantastic 1-2 punch at the Nationals. And we all know what the Nationals did last year. So I'm not saying that the Reds are going to go to the World Series anytime soon, but I'm saying that if you've got the makeup of a team that has two really solid starting rotation guys, you've got really solid hitting, Castellanos, Winkler. I mean, Joey Votto's getting older, but, Joey Votto. And you've got guys that are, Mike Moustakas. You've got guys that are able to get it done at the plate. I really see a lot of, hope in this team. I really see a lot of hope, and, maybe I'm wrong, but, as a fan of a division rival in the Milwaukee Brewers, it does scare me a little bit going against the Reds, because I think they are a formidable opponent for sure. But, it's not shocking that Gray should be starting on this team. I really think that he's one of the best, if not the best pitcher in the NL right now this year, so he would start on my all-star team. And then for the catcher, JT Realmuto. I think he's the best catcher in the NL, and probably maybe in baseball. He's hitting .273 with a 1.042 OPS, 8 homers, and that's something you don't see a lot out of catchers, are these big power numbers. And for a guy to be hitting that well, both for power and just in general, shows how much he has in potential for years to come. 20 RBIs for him this year, so he can really generate a lot of offense for Philly, and he's continued to build off of the year he had before, and he keeps improving. It makes me very excited to see how well he will progress as a player and moving forward. I think he's going to have a very bright future as a baseball player and as a catcher in this league for a long, long time. And then designated hitter, Jesus Aguilar. Quietly, Aguilar has been having a monster year, batting .308, 4 homers, 15 RBIs, a lot of power in his bat. But to see him with a higher than 300 average in over 50 at bats is an incredible sign. And for me, that's a really good sign for the Marlins. He isn't a great fielder, so he is a prime candidate for someone to thrive with this universal DH now. That rule goes through both leagues as of this year. He has the numbers to be on an all-star team, and especially in a starting role. So I think that's a legitimate selection for designated hitter. I know he's a first baseman, but I think that having him over at DH is going to suit them much more in an all-star game situation, and I think that would really elevate his chances of making an all-star team. So that's how I'd see the all-star teams this year if it were to happen. Unfortunately, this year we will not have the midseason classic. First time since World War II, actually, that the all-star game hasn't been played. But you know what? It's still fun to speculate and to still wonder who would be an all-star this year. So that'll wrap it up for us in our second segment here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Thanks again for tuning in. Coming up after the commercial break, I'll share my top 10 young baseball players in the league according to MLB.com, where the players land and which players I would have added to the list and think should be on the top 10. Don't go anywhere, everyone. We will be right back on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Great to have you all still with me today. Jack Ridenauer again, and we just wrapped up discussing who I would have in my starting all-star teams and which players I feel would make the team if there was an all-star game this year. I want to now discuss the top 10 young players ranking by MLB.com and the players they selected and which players I feel should be on that list, and then I'll give my ranking of the top 10 young players in the MLB right now. So for starters, the number one player on this list is no shock. I think MLB.com did get this one right. I think they did a good job with the first two at least. So from 1 to 10, I'll list their rankings. Number 1, Fernando Tatis Jr. Number 2, Juan Soto. Number 3, Luis Robert. Number 4, Ronald Acuna. Number 5, Dustin May. Number 6, Kyle Lewis. Number 7, Beau Beshet. Number 8, Cody Bellinger. Number 9, Chris Paddock. And number 10, Jesus Luzardo. So now that I look at it a little bit more, I think having Bellinger, who out of all of these players, and think about it, there's 10 very legitimate baseball players on here. Me, personally, I'm not completely sold on number 3, Luis Robert, and I'm also not sold on number 9, Chris Paddock. We'll hear a little bit more later on about my thoughts on that. But I think that having Cody Bellinger, who is the reigning MVP, he is a multiple-time All-Star, he's won a Silver Slugger, he has proved himself in this league time in and time out. Having him at 8, I think, is a little bit of an insult. And I don't know if they're basing it off of just this year. I know that a lot of these guys were not 25 years old. They were all younger than 25 years old. So this could possibly be just under 25 players, because there are a lot of 25-year-olds in the MLB that are unbelievable. I mean, Shane Bieber, Zach Plesac, a couple guys that I think would, I don't know how they were left off this list, but they were left off this list for whatever reason. But I still think that having Cody Bellinger, who is an MVP and who has proved himself, having him at 8, I think is a little bit of an insult. I would not have him at that position at all. I think I would probably have him in my top 3, quite frankly. So, maybe not number 1, maybe number 1. I don't know. That's, again, we'd have to see on that. But I think that, Tatis is hard to topple down with how well he's been playing. But if we are going off of career, then Bellinger would top this list, no question. Soto is someone who is going to be lethal for many years. He's already had the experience of winning a World Series at 21. He's hitting the mess out of the ball this year at .412 with 5 homers and 12 RBIs, but it's the fielding that worries me, and I think that's the biggest asterisk by his name right now. He has a hard time reading fly balls. He's got a good arm, but it's just the footwork, and it reminds me a little bit of how Bryce Harper, when he was young in D.C., but Soto has that World Series win under his belt, and that makes him stand out on this list. And quite frankly, I think that if you're talking about top 21-year-old baseball players, I mean, Tatis and Soto are the best in that regard. I mean, in that age range, they are unbelievable. Juan Soto is playing and has played like he's 28 years old, and he looks like he's been in the pros for the last 6, 7, 8 years. So having him at 2, I think that's probably one of the most legit rankings that they had on that list, in my opinion. Kyle Lewis is also a name that has been floating around a lot, and on an otherwise uninteresting Mariners team, he is definitely a big bright spot for them. Drives in runs, he hits for an average and power, not to mention draws a good bit of walks, gets on base. He really has a lot of pieces to him that can add up to being a big-time player in this league for some time. That 6th spot, I think, is the most accurate on the list for him. I think he's been very solid so far. So I think that Lewis at 6 and Soto at 2, I think those are, pretty solid locks. They're very solid locks. But I will say, I think Lewis could actually climb the ladder a little bit. I think that he's got a lot of upside. I think he's got a lot of potential. He's, batting over 300 this year, or if not close to it. He's got, he's on a team that he could potentially shine on because, again, it's a very lackluster Mariners team. They don't have a whole bunch of pieces. So if he starts doing really well, even better than he is now, and starts kind of building his career in Seattle, he's either going to, in the next 5 or 6 years, see himself as a Mariner for a lifetime, for his entire career, or he's going to eventually, want to leave, get out, leave through free agency, whatever it might be, and he could find himself on a bigger name team. And again, I think that, and I know I mentioned it earlier in the show today, I think that being on a team and having a team that has a lot of notoriety, I know I mentioned it in the last segment with Luke Voigt and how he's on the Yankees, you just get more publicity. You get more notoriety. People pay attention to you more. People are more likely to click on the Yankees game as opposed to the Mariners game. They're more likely to look at the Yankee stats as opposed to the Mariners stats. So as a result, guys like Kyle Lewis, they kind of fall by the wayside, and we never hear about them, which is unfortunate because Kyle Lewis is, again, a fantastic, fantastic talent. So look to see him continue to make a name for himself and continue to really carve out a spot in that, under 25-year-old ranking in the MLB right now. I really think that if he continues to put together a career that he's, done so far, and he's got, or he's put together the year that he's put together so far, and he does it for years to come, I think that we're going to hear Kyle Lewis's name much, much more. Beau Beshet is someone who I think could be an all-star this year also. Having him at 7th, I think, is fair. I do think he could be, I do think that he could be as good or better than Ronald Acuna. Yes, absolutely. So I could see those two switching spots because Acuna is that good of a player. Beshet does need to work on the glove a little bit and leads the Blue Jays in errors this year. Acuna does have a very solid glove, so that might be why he's a little bit higher on the list. But Beau Beshet, he's hitting over 350. He's got 5 home runs. He's doing a really nice job from the plate this year, and he's really an exciting piece for that young Blue Jays team. And when we hear about all these young teams that have all these young players, we hear about the Athletics, or we'll hear about the Padres, or so on and so forth. Nobody is really talking about the Blue Jays, and I think that it might be because of the league that they're in, the division that they're in the AL East. You're always focusing on the Yankees, and then you have the Rays playing very well, and then the Orioles are coming as a shock, and then the Red Sox stink. So the Blue Jays, again, they kind of just get put on the back burner, and they get put up on the top shelf, and nobody really pays attention to them. I think that in the next 5 years, we're going to see, and that is if everybody on the Rays, or on the Blue Jays, if everybody on the Blue Jays can stay healthy, can stay on the team, Cavan Biggio, Beau Beshet, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Hyun Jin Ryu, he was a big pickup for them in the offseason, adding some good pitching on their rotation. This could be a team that, it's kind of like how the Orioles are right now. They are a little lackluster for a couple of years, have a really tough time getting anything going, and then all of a sudden, they're surprising everybody and having a 12-8 record through the first 20 games like the Orioles are doing right now. So I think that as time goes on, we will hear more about the Blue Jays and Beau Beshet and company, so I'm really excited to see how he develops as a player. Again, needs to work on the glove, but I think having him at that 7th spot is very legitimate also. Dustin May is another guy I'm also very impressed with, not only with his ability, but also his confidence. Getting the opening day start after Kershaw went down with an injury, he came in, played like he had been in the majors for years. Sure, he had a little bit of a slow start, but man, did he settle in after that. Has been one of the top pitchers in the Dodgers organization, a guy with a lot of potential for this team, great fastball, really good ground ball pitcher, so someone who can get guys out in multiple ways, which is always a great sign to have from a guy in the rotation. Not to mention, with how Kershaw is and how injury prone he is, they're going to need somebody that is fairly reliable and that's going to, get the job done if he's out with an injury, or if there's, whatever is wrong with his back or his shoulder or his arm or what. It seems like the guy has got a grocery list of injuries that he's had over the years. But Dustin May, he could really come up into becoming his own and really rising up and, maybe down the road in the next couple of years being the ace of this Dodgers team. I really do see that. Walker Buehler's another young guy on that pitching rotation that does a really good job. Kenley Jansen, great closer for them, really good bullpen. Having Dustin May is just, again, adding just more, fire or more fuel to the fire for the Dodgers. And I think that Dustin May is going to be someone that is going to have a very long career. He's got a long, lanky frame. He's got a great release point. He does have a little bit of a whip back on his arm because he gets it, he throws it at about a 3/4 length. So he could potentially be prone to some arm injuries. But again, the fact that he's throwing, mid-90s, can top out at about 98 miles an hour. Half of his outs come from ground balls. So you got a guy that is a hard-throwing strikeout guy, but is also getting a lot of outs on the ground. That's really good. That's a really, really good sign to have if you were the Dodgers and if you're, planning for the future. This is somebody that they're going to want to keep around for as long as they can. Now, this is where I jump in because I think there are at least 2 guys on this list who I don't think should be on the list, and some players I feel were left off that could have been inserted into the top 10. So for one thing, Chris Paddack I don't think is a top 10 young player. He's got a lot of potential, sure, but with a 4.91 ERA and he leads the NL in hits, that doesn't really add up in my book to a top 10 ranking. A guy like Shane Bieber or Zach Plesac, like I mentioned, I think would be on this list well before him, in my opinion. Now, the list did seem, like I mentioned, to discount anyone that was 25 and up, so those 2 guys are 25, but I would make the list include 25-year-olds and immediately put those 2 in the top 10. Paddack might have some good years ahead of him, but he's going to need to limit those runs scored against him and not allow teams to have a field day at the plate against him. So he's one that I'm just not completely sold on. Not taking anything away from his talent. I'm just saying that I don't think that he should be a top 10, player, and I don't think he's really shown that he is capable of doing that and having that ability. Luis Robert is another one, and I think is, it's awfully high to have him at third. And especially if you're going to have the reigning MVP down at the bottom, towards 8, 9, 10, and have Robert, who is hitting .282 this year. Now, I know that Bellinger is struggling, and that is this year, and I get that. But again, having the reigning MVP not in your top 5, I think is a massive insult. Especially if you're picking a guy like Luis Robert, who this is his rookie year. He has not really proved anything. Sure, he's come out, to a pretty solid start. But, guys like Soto, he's almost hitting 200 points higher than him right now, and he's only a spot ahead. That should not happen. Not to mention, there's so many other guys on this list that are hitting better than Robert, and now, I'm not going to say that there probably isn't some potential and that there is some hope in Robert down the road. But, again, you have Beshet, who is hitting a much higher average than Robert is, and he's all the way at 7th. There's a lot of hype around Robert, but I just feel like it's a little early to put him in the top 10. Maybe a guy that's on the outside looking in, and, the rankings are switched around a little bit, but I just really don't see him being a top 10 young player in this league. Again, Beau Beshet is unbelievable. Kyle Lewis. Juan Soto, like I said, Juan Soto and him are separated by 1 spot. And I think that there is a massive separation in terms of talent and ability between Robert and Soto. And it's very clear. It's clear as day, especially in this season and how well Soto's been hitting as opposed to how, Robert has been hitting. Now, I will say these are some guys that I think that were left off the list. I don't think they should have been left off the list, and I'm very shocked that they were. So the first one that I'm shocked about is Rafael Devers. Now, he did get some votes, but didn't crack the top 10, and that is shocking to me. I know that he is not having a great year this year, but he did hit .311 as a 22-year-old last year, over a 900 OPS, 32 home runs, and 115 RBIs. Now, the one number I have to highlight is 115 RBIs. Over 100 RBIs as a 22-year-old in baseball is like being, I'll throw a basketball example out there, Trae Young, who's 21, 22, and he was 3rd in the league in scoring this year. That is unheard of. Somebody that young and driving in that much and having that big of a impact on a lineup that is already, they were really heavy in terms of hitters last year. The Red Sox they still have J.D. Martinez, but he's not hitting that well this year. But J.D. Martinez was hitting great last year. Mookie Betts, Xander Bogaerts, Rafael Devers. They've got guys, Benintendi. They've got guys that can hit the ball. And for Devers to be 22 and to really be right there with J.D. Martinez in terms of driving in runs, and that's a head-scratcher how he wasn't on the top 10. Now, this year he is struggling. He's only hitting 174, which is a brutal average to have, but he's still really young, and he can easily turn that around in future years. He does strike out a considerable amount compared to when he gets walked, so something he does need to work on and be a little bit more patient at the plate, but that will come with age and maturity. There's not many guys out there that are wildly patient hitters, and if you do have somebody that is young and that patient, it's, finding like a rock in a hard place, or finding a gem in a diamond in the rough. It's just you don't really see it very often. And so I think that Devers is somebody to be very hopeful for. And now actually I think about it also, the Yankees or the Red Sox have another very young guy on their team that I'm shocked that wasn't on this list, Alex Verdugo. I think Alex Verdugo is going to be a player that we hear a lot more about, and that his stock will continue to rise also. The Red Sox, they got rid of a lot of players. They got rid of a lot of pieces. And I've got a good buddy of mine that is is a humongous Red Sox fan. I mean, he's from Boston. He eats, sleeps, and breathes all Boston teams. And he always is saying, well, I'm not really happy with what they did with Betts. They shouldn't have got, so on and so forth. Okay, yeah, I get that. I understand that. But again, if you're looking at the long term, you still have J.D. Martinez for however long you have him. And then you factor in, you've got, once Eduardo Rodriguez gets better from his COVID-19 complications, and if Evaldi can figure it out, and if they can get Chris Sale back, and then all of a sudden Devers starts picking it up, and Alex Verdugo starts doing his thing, Xander Bogaerts been hitting very well, and Jackie Bradley Jr. is a great center fielder. So really, I don't see a whole lot to be upset about. If you're a Red Sox fan, I think if anything, you've got a lot to be hopeful for and looked forward to, and it's one of them is being, again, Rafael Devers. He is such a bright spot in that team. I think that we're going to hear so much more about him for years to come. He would have been in my top 10, no question. Johan Mankata is another guy. I was shaking my head, wasn't on the list, and again, he is 25, so maybe that's why they didn't count him, but Mankata tore it up last year, batted .315, .915 OPS, someone who has improved significantly from his 2018 year, where he led the majors in strikeouts. He's batting .278 this year, so not wild, but not terrible, but his strikeout numbers dropped from 217 in 2018 to 154 in 2019. So a big-time improvement, something to definitely highlight and to make note of. Again, that's a guy that is, as he's getting older, he's starting to learn the value of patience at the plate. And now, again, somebody that Rafael Devers should maybe take a page out of his playbook. Hey, this is a guy that, I could compare myself to, similar, type of player. Devers might be a little bit more of a power hitter than Mankata might be, but still both very high strikeout guys. And you watch and see somebody in, your same league in the AL, cut down his strikeout numbers by 50 plus. It's very doable. It's very doable if you're Rafael Devers. So don't be shocked if he comes back next year ready to roll. This might be a year that the Red Sox scratch and just say, hey, we're just going to start new next year. This is just not our year. And look to see Rafael Devers being in the forefront of that charge. And Yohan Mankata, he's really, he's going to lead the charge like, Devers will for the Red Sox. Mankata's going to lead the charge for the White Sox for many years. I think Mankata is going to be a name that we will continue to hear about much, much more. And I am just floored he wasn't on this list. Another guy, Kestenhira, maybe not quite in the top 10 of young players, but very close. Very, very close. He also received some votes for the rankings. He burst onto the scene last year with Milwaukee, hitting .303, got called up midway through the year. Really nice addition to their team last year. And really, I think he had a lot to do with their late season push into the playoffs. And if you don't factor in his bat in the lineup, you don't factor in him hitting 19 home runs, 49 RBIs, and hitting for an above 300 average, I don't know if we would have had a Brewers Nationals wild card matchup in the playoffs. I really don't think that would have happened. Now, as far as the glove goes, he's got a pretty good glove at second base. Could possibly see him make a push to being one of the better young players in this league as time goes on, and he's definitely going to be somebody that if Milwaukee can hang on to, they're going to have a really good solid core group of young guys, for years to come. Maybe that's what they're doing. Maybe they're trying to build for the future. And Kestenhira could be, again, like how Mankata is with the White Sox and how Devers is with the Red Sox. Kind of one of those forefront guys in these, on these, teams that have young guys, young players that are not experienced, not matured, and as a result, you get a 6-15 start like the Red Sox have or whatever. But you give it a couple years and you could flip that around very, very easily. And so I think Kestenhira is going to be somebody for the Brewers that is going to definitely get it going sooner rather than later. So the way I would re-rank this ranking would be if it were all based off of career so far and potential, I have to put Cody Bellinger at first. Too strong of a hitter to ignore and to not put at first, not to mention an MVP, so he would be first on my list. And again, I'm basing this off of careers and, and potential, so it's both, but the forefront is careers, no question. Number 2, Juan Soto. Next to Kyle Lewis being 6th, I think, this was the next legitimate ranking from MLB.com. Number 3, Fernando Tatis Jr. No question a top 3 player. If he puts together an MVP year or at least has a 300-plus season, he will be in the conversation with these 3 guys for years to come. And really, Yeah, Tatis this year is better than Bellinger. Yeah, I will say that 100%. But I think that, again, if we're going off of overall career performance and what they've done leading up to this, I think Cody Bellinger has just done way more than Fernando Tatis has. And again, Tatis is, good 2-3 years younger than him and has not been in the league as long. So he's got some room to grow and some room to improve, and he could surpass Bellinger in the NL and in the NL West. Number 4, Beau Beshet, great bat, a lot of potential. I really like what I have seen out of Beshet. Number 5, Ronald Acuna Jr., really good fielder, really good hitter, and he has a lot of room to grow, and he's on a very talented team. So again, it will bring more attention to him, and I think that we'll, him and Albies, Ozzie Albies was another guy that was left off of this list that I think could have made it also, because again, he's another very good young player for the Braves. But Ronald Acuna Jr., he's fantastic, so I'd have to slide him in at number 5. Number 6, Kyle Lewis. I like the spot he's at with 6th. I think he could go up even higher if he keeps up putting the numbers he has. Number 7, Rafael Devers. Although he is struggling, I think he would be a great player for years to come, no question about it. Number 8, Jesus Luzardo, young star for the Athletics, has already pitched well this year, and he's gotten some reps in last year too, so he's getting started in his career, which is always a great sign, especially with how young he is. Number 9, Dustin May. Great combo of strikeouts mixed with groundouts from this guy, which is always a deadly, deadly combo. And then number 10, rounding out the top 10, Johan Mankata. I think this is a potential. He has the potential to be a star in this league and is already well on his way. And I think that it might not be the year he had last year that he's having this year, but still, to be 25 and still doing as well as he is, and that he's showing a sign of improvement. He's on the up and up for sure. So those are the 10 best young players I feel in the league right now, and players who would make a big impact down the road, and really the future of the MLB. So that'll wrap it up for this segment, folks. Thanks for sticking around. Stay right there, because we'll be right back after this commercial break for the final segment today, where I will run through my top home run derbies over the last 10-plus years, and which ones I have very fond memories of watching. We'll be right back here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
Hey everyone, and welcome back for the final segment here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Jack Ridenauer still with you, and in the last segment I discussed the top young players in the MLB and re-ranked the MLB.com's top 10 young players and who I thought should have made the list. I want to now finish things up discussing my favorite home run derbies, and some of these are a little bit beyond 10 years, some from when I was a kid to some that are a little bit more recent. So I'll get started, and I have to say, last year's home run derby was unbelievable. It was an incredible watch. I think that the rule change is very interesting. I was actually talking to a friend of mine about the different style from when we grew up to now with the time, and you have 4 minutes to hit as many as you can. I think it adds excitement, but you do, run into the issue of guys getting tired, and then their numbers might not be as high if they, took their time with having 10 outs. Still, it was one for the ages. Watching Pete Alonso and Vladimir Guerrero Jr. trade shots in the final round, and not to mention Pete Alonso did win, but Vlad, I think, stole the show, mainly for that semi-final performance between Jock Peterson. It was back-to-back incredible rounds for Vladimir Guerrero. It was really awesome to watch him. He was teeing off on balls, and he's 19 years old, 20 years old, 21 years old, whatever he might be, and he's hitting 488-foot home runs. It was the longest one of the Derby last year by him, 488 feet. That is unbelievable. In the semifinal round, Peterson and Vlad combined for almost 80 home runs, Vlad hitting 40 and Peterson hitting 39 in that second round. It was such an incredible watch. That tiebreaker was really cool to see the swing off. It was really interesting to watch. Hats off, though, to Alonso for winning. He had a monster year last year, and with all the home runs he hit, pretty impressive. And again, it's kind of unfortunate. I think that Vladimir Guerrero's performance overshadowed Pete Alonso winning. And I felt bad for Vlad because he didn't win, because, I mean, I remember watching that second round and just being floored how he could generate that much power over and over and over again in his swing and continue to hit moonshots. I mean, the longest one, like I said, was 488 feet, but that wasn't, I mean, he was hitting consistently 450-plus foot home runs back to back to back. I mean, there was 2 or 3 times I remember him hitting the scoreboard out in the outfield, and, I mean, it was high up on the scoreboard. It wasn't like he just dinged the bottom of it. I mean, he was hitting, the center of the scoreboard, and the scoreboard is ginormous. But, again, that back and forth tiebreaker between Peterson and Vlad, I mean, that was so wild to watch. I mean, you get the 3 extra swings, and, they're just matching each other on everything. And, again, hats off to Jock Peterson. He was actually added into last year's Derby because, I can't remember, I think it was Christian Yelich that decided to sit out. Somebody's decided to sit out, and so he got the invite to the home run derby, and good thing he did, because if he didn't get to go and it was somebody else, I don't think we would have had the exciting semifinal round matchup between Vlad and whoever that might have been if that person, whatever player it was, I can't exactly remember, but if they did wind up going. But good thing Peterson did come, because I mean it was one for the ages. So next one, the 2018 home run derby, Bryce Harper was the winner, and this is a very special one for me because it was in Washington D.C. and being a Maryland native, I grew up about 25 minutes outside of D.C. So having the Derby in your home run city or in your home city is really cool. I actually got to go with my dad to the Derby. I went with my family to the All-Star game the next day, and I remember the day very well with my dad. It was scorching hot, and for anyone who doesn't know what D.C. heat is like, it's very hot, it's very humid, and it's really muggy. And it was just like that on that day. My dad and I were covered in sweat by the time the final round came, and again, it was 10:30 at night, and we were just drenched in sweat. We had been there since about 6 o'clock in the evening. It was a pretty regular derby, though, nothing crazy or wild, but the final round was really exciting between Kyle Schwarber and Bryce Harper. It was down to the wire. Bryce Harper won over the crowd that night to win it in a walk-off fashion in front of the home crowd. It was pretty incredible. Harper didn't necessarily dominate his way to the championship either. He only hit 13 homers in the first round and in the second round as well. So that final round, he definitely was saving himself, I think. Really cool to watch the whole thing unfold. If anyone out there ever gets the chance in the future, whenever we can all go back to games, to go to an MLB All-Star game, it's a pretty incredible experience. And something that is incredibly memorable, I think. I highly recommend it. I actually had a friend of mine who is a ginormous Tampa Bay Rays fan go back a couple years ago when I think it was in Miami, and he drove from Tampa to Miami, and I mean, he said it was like nothing he's ever been to in his entire life. And I remember him telling me that, and then once I heard that the Nationals were going to have it at their home field in 2018, I told my parents, I said, hey, we got to go. We got to find a way to go. Luckily and thankfully, we were able to find a way to go. And, I mean, they just put on such a good show. They do such a great job. And the home run derby, I mean, that's such a fun thing to watch, right? I mean, just guys hitting bombs after bombs after bombs. I mean, that is such a fun thing to watch. And really, I mean, who wouldn't want to watch that, right? Even if you're not a baseball fan, watching the home run derby, I think, is something that, I mean, it just comes with just being a sports fan. I mean, it's exciting, it's exhilarating, and again, it's just that whole premise of all these guys are doing is hitting home runs. That's all. That is it. So next one that I really loved and I was a big fan of, 2012, Prince Fielder was the winner, and this is another big one for me because my favorite player growing up, Prince Fielder, was the winner, and I know he won a few years before, but to do it again, and when he wasn't with the Brewers anymore, it was still cool to watch happen. Not a ton of homers were hitting this one either, Fielder being the highest with 28, and compared to the one, last year in 2019, that is like night and day, honestly. What is funny about this is I don't know about funny, but Robinson Cano was the one, selecting the hitters for the AL. And he didn't select Billy Butler of the Royals. And that year, Billy Butler had a really, really good year. And the Royals were hosting the All-Star game that year. So he was met with a very loud boo by the crowd, but he didn't hit a single home run. And then afterwards, there was some news flying around about how the Kansas City fans, I guess, had apparently been targeting Cano's family. So a lot of intense feelings between the Royals fans and Cano, all for just not picking the hometown favorite, which I thought was a little bit overboard. A little bit overboard, but I think, everybody knows how Kansas City sports fans are. They're very passionate. They do love their teams. We all saw that this past year with the Chiefs winning the Super Bowl. So, I mean, Do I think that they need to go after his family? No. Do I think that happened? I have no idea. It's just some, rumors that had floated around, but still a little bit of drama to go on with that home run derby. But it was really cool to watch. I mean, Prince Fielder, with his kid out on the field and, raising the home run derby trophy. And again, that's also a time in Prince Fielder's career where he was on a little bit of a downturn. I mean, he was still being named an all-star. He was still producing. He was still playing very, very well. But that's when injuries started to really pick up on him, having all those neck issues. And it just kind of snowballed from there for him. And it was really unfortunate. I'll never forget watching his retirement press conference, and he was just so emotional. And you could just tell that it bothered him so much that he was having to walk away just because of all the health issues that he was having with his neck and just all sorts of other injury problems. But it was a really cool moment to see, my favorite player growing up win again, and, not just once but twice, too. And I think that the 2012 one was a little bit sweeter. Obviously, the first one he won with the Brewers is always really cool to see, your hometown, or not your hometown team, but your favorite team, somebody on that team win the home run derby. But to surpass that, and it be, your favorite player, and for him to win it again, I mean, you're always going to root for the guy, always going to root for the guy. Obviously wasn't a Tigers fan when he went to the Tigers, but still, I always rooted for Prince Fielder, and I still do to this day, even though he's no longer playing anymore. Now, the next one, 2008, Justin Morneau, Yankee Stadium. I mean, this was a very memorable one for me. Really one of the most memorable ones of my childhood, I would say. I mean, it was I remember watching it, and I remember watching the replays, and it was just like so jaw-dropping what, Josh Hamilton did in that opening round, and, hitting 28 bombs. He set a record for most in a round. He hit 13 of them with 2 outs. Now, this is when it was a 10-out format, and quite frankly, again, having those 2 outs left, I think it just adds to the pressure, because it's not like a time where you still have a minute left and you can strategically plan for your last 2 minutes in this situation. It's only 10 outs, and you really, you've got to be very strategic, and you could be done really after 10 swings. So it takes much more focus and patience, I think, to do what Hamilton did, because he was only allowed a few mistakes, whereas in the new format, 5 to 6 groundouts or a couple flyouts in a row, it can be made up very quickly. And that's the thing. I think that's where the time kind of takes away from, hey, you've got to be perfect. You've got to be pristine. You've got to be precise with every single swing that you take. And it also comes from your pitching coach. Whoever is throwing you BP behind that screen has to be very accurate. And a lot of people, and it's unfortunate, but a lot of people will point the finger at the pitching coach if they don't, give good pitches to the hitters. And trust me, there's been a lot of times, a lot of guys over the years where, their pitching coach had come under fire for just, not throwing very well, not giving them hittable pitches. And again, you can't blame the pitching coach, right? I mean, he is the one that is throwing it, and he is the one that's setting up the home run, but he's not a professional pitcher. He's not, some of these guys that are bringing in, it's like their friend or their dad or their brother, not, their actual pitching coach, not their actual BP coach that's thrown BP years and years and years and years and has a lot of repetition and a lot of practice with it. Some of these guys, they're bringing in family and friends. So how can you expect somebody who's not used to being in the limelight, not used to being on television, throwing pitches that are very crucial and very, impactful for this guy at the plate who's trying to win this home run derby? How can you put that much pressure on someone like that, right? I mean, you can't do that. It's a little bit ridiculous. So I think that having the time kind of takes away from that on the edge of your seat. Hey, is he gonna ground out? Oh, that's one ground out, so that's already 9 outs left. Because when you watch the home run derby now, you see a lot of guys, they just go up and they swing and they swing and they swing and they swing, and they're coming up with 4 or 5 flyouts. That would be, you'd be halfway done with your round, and you would have yet to hit a home run back 10 years ago. So a big difference in rules. I don't hate the time. I still think it's kind of cool, and it definitely does put a little bit of pressure on the hitters. Got to get as many as you can in before that 4-minute mark runs out. I think it's 4 minutes, 4 or 5 minutes, something like that. But, using that, it's very strategic now. You hit as many as you can, you stop, take a timeout, then you go back and do it again. So it's a little bit more strategic, and I think it's set up also a little bit more for more home runs, bigger home run power. And I think that probably was why they went away from the 10-out rule. I mean, when you see the home run totals from 10 years ago as opposed to last year, I mean, it's flooring. It's flooring to see the difference because, I mean, when you have a home run derby that was, 80, 85 home runs as opposed to a home run derby that's got 300 home runs in it or, 200 home runs in it, whatever it might be, I mean, that's a really big difference. That's a really, really big difference. But again, that was a really fun one to watch. And, not to mention, it was cool to see Hamilton do that after all of his off-the-field issues he had with drug problems and everything, and to see him bounce back and perform like he did, that was really cool to watch. And I think that's what made it such an awesome story surrounding that home run derby was just how, much he struggled with that. And I mean, it was very apparent in the news. I mean, you heard about it all the time. You'd always hear about him having a relapse or, whatever it might have been. And then that time of period when he was clean, he was arguably the best hitter in baseball. I mean, he was an MVP one year. So to see him come out after all of that struggle that he had and then have some sort of wild career resurgence and really start to just tee off on balls left and right. I mean, and then hitting 13 with 2 outs. Talk about getting locked and loaded and being, in the zone. I mean, that is being in the zone, no question about it. So my last home run derby that I think was so memorable and really next to the 2018 one I think are, two of the most memorable ones for me, mainly because of one particular moment that happened, the 2006 home run derby at PNC Park. Ryan Howard was a winner, and Ryan Howard was actually batting at this point, and I can't remember if it was the last round or the round before, but there was a sign out in the outfield at PNC Park, and it was, a hit here to donate, money for whatever cause it might have been, and it was some, donation for a really, really good cause, and I was like 9 or 10 at the time, so this was years ago, and he crushed this ball, and he hit the sign, and I just remember PNC Park erupting, I mean, going absolutely wild, and it was really cool to see that, with his one swing, he made that place go crazy, and he was able to donate for an awesome cause. Howard actually didn't hit that well in the first round. He only had 8 home runs. David Wright from the Mets, he seemed to jump all over pitches early on. He had 16 in the first round. Second round, though, Howard came back with a big performance, and Wright cooled off significantly, but they went into the final round both tied with 18 home runs. The finals, it was a close one. Howard edging out Wright 5-4 with a total of 23 home runs on the day. And just think, Hamilton 2 years later would hit 5 more home runs in one round than Howard did in the entire event. It's pretty crazy to think about. And also think about Howard hit 23 total home runs in the entire thing. Vladimir Guerrero hit 40 last year in the new format. 40. He doubled up on Ryan Howard. And he was 21 years old. So that's even more incredible. And, obviously the rule changes, it does add for a little bit of a different feel, but it's still really cool to watch these guys hit home run after home run. And it makes it exciting. I mean, I think that, going back to, if you're not a diehard baseball fan, and you come up to somebody and say, yeah, I'm not a huge baseball guy because it's slow or it's not as, offensive, it's not as action-packed, I see what they're saying. Me as a ginormous baseball guy, and I, eat, sleep, and breathe baseball, and really sports in general, I don't fall in that category because I could just sit and watch baseball for hours, an entire day, really. And so, but I do understand where people are coming from. And I think that the home run derby is really a great event to have to try and draw in loving baseball fans, people that are just the general fan, right? And I think that, as a strong, loving baseball fan like me, it doesn't take much to draw me in. I mean, a 1-0 baseball game is obviously not the most exciting, but I will still watch it and I still enjoy it because I'm watching the pitcher's duel. I'm watching these guys, mow guys down, sit 3 up, 3 down, sitting guys down left and right. But having, a fan that is, I don't want to watch that 1-0, that's boring. And then you have an event where it's home run after home run after, I mean, that is going to bring in the excitement. That's going to bring in just the general fan. So I think the home run derby is a big thing, and it's unfortunate that it won't happen this year. And, I went with the all-star theme in my second segment, so I figured, hey, why not wrap it up with a little bit of the home run derby? I can't, leave out, one of the best all-star events in all of sports, in my opinion, out of this conversation, out of this episode. So, that is, those are my favorite home run derbies. Those are the ones that I really enjoyed and really, I just had so many memories of. So that's going to do it for today, folks. Had a lot of fun sharing these moments with you all, discussing some other All-Star related things, and not to mention sharing the best young players in the MLB and who could really go down the road, or could really be good down the road. And once a couple years go by, we'll start to hear these guys' names a little bit more, and we'll start to see them develop even more. And who knows, we might be talking about future MVP candidates, and I think that we are watching in the making right now a couple of them as it is right now. So once again, thank you for listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps us out. Again, we're always about improving and getting better, so anything that you have to share with us, please feel free, because we are always trying to improve and make the show better and better each and every episode. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Stay up to date on any content and updates on episodes, just to keep you all clued in as to when these podcasts will be coming out. Would really appreciate it. Once again, thank you so much for joining me, and have a fantastic day.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.